Good morning, evening, or night, everyone. Today I will be covering some minor Glaggle species, and if you have any video suggestions, feel free to comment them. Anyway, let's begin. The first species I would like to cover is the diggy. The diggy are a calm but distressed species who live mostly in Glaggle and Gleberland. They have reflective skin due to it being made out of glass and a left to right purple to lilac gradient. They have spiral-like eyes and a small wiggly mouth, and they are a little smaller than most gigglers. Diggies are very confused and distressed most of the time and easily forget things because of their amnesia, and because of their amnesia they can't work hard jobs. But some can have some sort of control over their memory, allowing them to work harder jobs than other diggy. As for the history of the diggies, they appeared later in the Glaggle massacre, may the souls of the fallen rest easy, where a few were spotted in the middle of it. They were taken to a Glaggle hospital with only 2 of the 7 being harmed in any way. Glaggle researchers took one diggy to research on. Once everything with the massacre was over and they finished research on the one diggy, all 7 of the diggies were allowed out for a week as a test. Once the test was complete, they were deemed innocent and safe as normal citizens, but the researchers would still check up on them every day. One diggy who wanted to be tested on by researchers would have a little bit of infusion goo put on them and be fed some food and drinks. During the investigation period, only 2 diggies died, one from being experimented on, and the other when an infusion cracked a diggy's skin and put cement in it, giving them a slow, painful, cruel death. But after the investigation period, the Great Glag said they were innocent, and then the diggy were let free permanently, and now there is over 600 of them. The next species I will be covering today is the spookler. Spooklers are nocturnal and like to live in dark and gloomy areas like Glabberland and sometimes Frowntown. Their skin is a gradient, being brownish tan at the top and a very dark blue as the bottom. They have glowing white oval eyes and a similarly glowing white jagged mouth without any ends. Spooklers are mischievous pranksters and like to stay in dark and scary areas and scare any Glaggles who pass by. But they don't have any intent to harm you, even if it does make them seem rude. They like to live alone in dark forests and long abandoned buildings. The reason spooklers are nocturnal is because they melt in bright lights, even just camera flashes and flashlights. These are also the only things that scare spooklers. Even though spooklers are really good at scaring people, they are pretty dumb and aren't as advanced as most Glaggles, using primitive weapons to fight and still using scythes to gather food. The spookler's history goes way back in time, all the way back to the Glaggle Empire. And during this time, they were even more rare than they are now due to there being less shade, so they stayed in caves and dense forests. In fact, they were so rare that they were just folklore and thought to be evil spirits trying to possess people. As the folklore passed and had more and more iterations, a new spookler entity began to emerge, the Grim Spookler. The Grim Spookler is a hooded spookler who holds a scythe and hunts down scared Glaggles who are on their own, eats their fear, and then kills them. Around the mid-1800s, the first evidence of spooklers actually being real was acquired when a group of Glabbers befriended one. The news spread quickly like wildfire across the world, and people began to fear them because of the rumors. But they quickly were disproved by researchers, and over time, more people began to understand them, and they began to start inhabiting more areas, mainly Glabberland. The third species I'm going to go over today is the glugs. Their skin is sticky and viscous, and they're able to shapeshift into objects, and they're always happy to do so to help. Glugs were just gigglers, but were created after workers fell into radioactive goop at the radioactive center of Glaggerland. That's also where the glugs work. This goop is also called Schlugarzanium, and when a giggler falls into it, they turn into a glug after approximately 10 minutes. Glugs were also how mimics were created, when an infusion captured a glug and ejected it with a lot of infusion sludge. Next up we have the merlex. Merlex live in the tropical areas of eastern Gluberland and southern Gemboland. They are magenta in color and are happy and cheerful, but also quite crazed. You can tell from them having 2 different sized eyes and a maniac grin. They also range from being the quarter of the size to a normal Glaggle to half the size of a normal Glaggle, which makes them really small. They are short-tempered and tend to bite people when they get mad. They're also the rarest Glaggle who isn't a secret Glaggle, but they used to be secret but they were too common. They are also the only Glaggle immune to the Paul effect. Merlex were discovered around the mid-1400s in Gemboland at the beach when a few Gembos saw a bunch of them having the time of their lives. The Gembos wanted to get closer to figure out what this new species of Glaggle was and what they were doing, and at first the merlex were friendly and having fun. But one of the Gembos provoked a merlex and got bit by it and started a fight. But in the end, the Gembos had captured 12 merlex but had all been injured. In jail, the merlex were not crazed, but were really sad and unhappy. But they ended up escaping by chewing through the bars and escaped to Gluberland, but they left all the other ones at the beach. The cheer is one of the fan favorites. They live mainly in places along Glaggerland, but can also be seen in Gemboland and Gleberland. They have an almost sunset-like gradient and confetti over their bodies. Cheers aren't really closely related to any main species in Glag world. Cheers like jumping up in front of people and scaring them, but just for fun. They also like to cheer up sad Glaggles and make them happy. Cheers have a pretty low population because they make insensitive jokes sometimes, which lead to them getting bullied and assaulted by other Glaggles. They also get led to very dangerous places sometimes, like the Night Gargler's domain or in Phocius, to be murdered. Cheers also have two catchphrases, one being, "We like to spread fun and games everywhere, how frolic," and the other one just being, "How frolic." The most common victims of crimes are cheers because they can be annoying. Cheers are an extremely old species, dating back to right after the Infurricane, and used to live in small areas far away from everyone else. But as Glaggles began to dominate the lands, they would spread out more. For a lot of the cheers' beginnings, they would live in the Gembo Empire as sort of jesters to cheer everyone up. Because of their acts, they ended up becoming extremely popular, although not really being found outside the Gembo Empire. Eventually, they spread to places like the Glaggle Empire and Gleberland, being welcomed by all to both. I'm not going to cover all the Cheers history because it's more InfoSoweb related, but this is pretty much all the basics. The second to last Glaggle for today is the bibbler. Bibblers are created when a Glaggle enters the waters of the Blibbick Swamp at Blibble's Field. Bibblers are cyan, but with a very slight indigo coloring at the bottom. They have very long eyes and a similarly long mouth with no endings. They are also a little bit less smart than your average Glaggle. There are 4 stages of being turned into a bibbler. Stage 1 is when the subject Glaggle enters into the waters of the Blibbick Swamp and start to feel vibrations across their body. In Stage 2, their eyes will begin to elongate and the subject Glaggle will begin to start turning cyan. The third stage is when the saturation of the cyan coloring becomes greater and its eyes will become even more elongated. The subject Glaggle will also partake in a phenomenon known as the rapid circle. The Glagglepedia does not describe what the rapid circle is, but that's the way they fully transform into bibblers. But the final stage is the full transformation into the bibbler. There's also a rare form of bibbler where they're just blue instead of cyan, and their numbers have shrunk from 600 to 300 after the Battle of Blibble's Field. Last, but not least, we have the gizmos. Gizmos are gray Glaggles with a large smile with triangular endings, and have wide ovuloid rhombuloid eyes. Gizmos are not joyous or chill like other Glaggles, but are instead very dramatic, making them very great actors. They live mostly in Gizmoland, making it the hub of theater in Glag world, but they also have populations in Gemboland, Glaggoland, and Tunglornius. Gizmos are kind, but can also be quite narcissistic. The reason gizmos are so dramatic is because of an excess of a hormone called histriofecin. There are about 14 million gizmos worldwide, with 9 million of them living in Gizmoland, and the other 5 million living elsewhere. But because of the Great Gizmobian Fire of 2017, the gizmos have been considered endangered and destroyed Gizmoland's capital and its business city, Gizmobia. It also killed 750,000 gizmos. Gizmos have a lot of history and deep culture, but there's so much that if I included it, it would probably take up most of this video. So maybe I'll just dedicate a full video to them on their own, and maybe the Bamella, because their page is also huge. Anyways, that was a decent amount of minor Glaggle species. If you'd like a part 2 or want another video, comment your suggestions or something. Alright, see you later.